The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Taskfeed Task Template Deep Dive webinar. We're just going to wait about a minute for everyone else to join in. And in the meantime, I'm going to launch a quick poll for you to answer. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jessica Graham Morris, and I'm Taskfeed's Customer Success Manager. I'm part of a team that works closely with our customers, providing them all the resources that helps them achieve their outcomes for using Taskfeed. Now for some housekeeping basics, this session is being recorded and it will be available on YouTube, on our YouTube channel on Friday. I have provided a handout for you that you can access on the GoToWebinar widget, and it contains links and support material that we covered today. And as a bonus, we have also included a digital version of our customer onboarding handbook for you to take home with you. You can ask questions on the chat window, and I'll have some time in the end to go over them. We love your feedback, so feel free to add your comments and suggestions to the follow-up email that you'll receive tomorrow. Most of you in the audience today are what we call Taskfeed Admin users, but for anyone watching the webinar at a later time, you may not identify with this role. So the Taskfeed Admin user is anyone who has the Taskfeed Admin user permission set in their org. You may not necessarily be the Salesforce system administrator in your org, but you have access to all of the Taskfeed objects installed in your environment. So if you're the person responsible for defining the process that will be mapped to Taskfeed, it makes sense that you have that permission set given to you. To create and manage Taskfeed templates, you need the Taskfeed admin permission set in Salesforce, so just a heads up. In this session, I'm going to be talking about defining a process to be mapped in Taskfeed. So this is what needs to be defined before creating a template. I'll give you a quick overview of what the two template formats we have in Taskfeed. And finally, I'll show you how to create a task template while giving you the full scope of what you need and how to create these templates. I'll save some time for Q&A in the end if anyone has questions. So let's get started. Once upon a time, there was a customer journey. As you probably already know, Taskfeed is a project management tool built entirely in the Salesforce platform. Most of our customers use Taskfeed to support their high-touch customer onboarding process after an opportunity is closed and won. That's not to say that all of them use Taskfeed this way. While some customers use Taskfeed to manage a single process, many of them have different sets of playbooks, one for each segment, products, or services they sell. Depending on the maturity stage they're in, they'll start with one process and then build from there. It's an organic growth a lot of the time. But building a best practice playbook is important so everyone is on the same page, working on the same version, and you're giving yourself, your team, and your customers a delivery that is consistent and measurable over time. This is where Taskfeed templates come into play. Taskfeed templates are more than just creating a to-do list ahead of time. Taskfeed templates support different processes and turn them into actionable items with dependencies, timelines, roles, and lots more information that you can predefine and make that your guide in living and visual form. Each playbook will be a Taskfeed template that contains a consistent set of tasks and points of contact. Does that mean that we can only have one template at a time? What if the journey is different, depending on the product that we sell or a different criteria? Let's say you're an event planner and you organize weddings, birthday parties, and corporate events. If a customer hires you to organize their wedding, the activities involved in the planning of that wedding will be different from the birthday party you're organizing for a different customer, for instance, even if some of these tasks are kind of the same. Ideally, you will have a separate task template for each of those events. So let's see all that cool stuff we can create and include in a task template. So when you create a board out of the box, a Taskfeed board for the first time, this is what you'll see. You have the lists over here. So out of the box, you'll see not started, in progress, waiting, complete. These lists are customizable. So for instance, if I don't like waiting, I can change this to on hold. And you also have more advanced options over here. So if I click edit on my list, I can change the background color. I can give it, can change it to blue. And you're going to see that it also has some behavior. So for instance, if it's a complete list or, something that I want to archive, I can change the behavior by setting these things over here. So I can hide tasks from my inbox. Okay, so I just changed the behavior for a list in a board that I already created for a single one. So if I want to do that for all of the boards of a certain type, like project, for instance, then what's going to happen is I'm going to have to do this from a list template. So the task templates will define a list of tasks that you're going to create ahead of time, and those are the ones that define your process. So for instance, this is a board that has a set of tasks from a task template created ahead of time. So we're not going to be creating each of these manually and from scratch one by one every time we want to create an onboarding board or a project board. So what we're going to be doing and what I'm going to be showing you is how to create this template. So the first thing that you need to know is that when you create a Taskfeed template, you create it from a source file. This source file comes from spreadsheets, just like in Excel or using Google Sheets in this case. Creating a template is a source file is a little bit like preparing data to import with a data import wizard, but it's a lot more fun, I promise you. You're going to see a lot of the similarities. You need to prepare the data and you need to make sure that it's compatible with Salesforce. In this case, it has to be compatible with the language that we use in Taskfeed. So for instance, if we go back over here and I click on a specific task, these are the things that you can expect to see from a task template. So you're going to have the name, and that's going to be the name of your task. You're going to have things like a start date. You're going to have a duration. You can, if you have external sharing, you can mark things as internal only. So when you share that board with a customer outside of Salesforce, they won't be able to see that. So let's go to the basics and see what are the fields that everyone should have every time on our template. If you haven't created a Taskfeed template yet, you can download one from our help documents, and the link is on the handout that is provided to you. There's a downloadable file over here if you go on our help documents, and you just click download, and that will give you a sample template that you can use, and it's exactly like this one that we're going to work with today. So the first thing is the name, and this already comes in the sample template. And in the past, so if you've used Taskfeed for a while, before it used to be the API names on the column headers over here, and that was a little bit complicated if you're not familiar with API names. But now all you have to do is just put the label, the name of the field that you see. So things like duration, days, name, these labels over here. Okay, so let's go back. So when you create your first template, you're going to map your first process. So let's say this is going to be my onboarding. So these are the tasks that I would normally have. Okay, so the first one is internal handover from sales to onboarding. Order is the order that it's going to appear on your board. So each of these tasks, okay, it's directly related to the list. So remember I talked about, not started, in progress, complete. Well, normally if you're creating a board and you're starting off your process from the beginning, if you have a list that is called not started, most of your tasks are going to start on this one. So, but if you rename this list for whatever reason, make sure that it's called whatever it is that you called over here on your task template. So if you renamed this to, to do instead, you're not going to write not started. You're going to write to do. And then you put the order as it appears on that particular list. The next thing I have here is checklist. It's checklist items. So you can define ahead of time if you want to have any checklist items for each of these tasks. So each line will be a separate task. So let's have a look here at this and see. I don't have any checklist items here, but I have checklist items on my second task. So as you can see, I have 3 different ones. For each line on your checklist item, you're going to separate it with a hash symbol, okay? So that's how you're going to break. You're putting everything in one cell for each of these tasks. On your next one, you're going to put the checklist items that pertain to the other task. So now let's talk a little bit about the scheduling. Most of the time you're going to put a start date, and because it's a template, the same way that we would create a template in Word or Excel, it's a skeleton. You're not going to put an exact date.
When creating a template, use a generic placeholder date that represents when the first task should start in relation to the board.
And you're going to find out in just a few minutes why you don't need to put an end date. The reason why you won't do that is because as long as you put your duration in days, Taskfeed will calculate the end date for this task automatically from a template level, which obviously you can readjust when you start your project. Every task needs a reference. A reference is literally a unique word, a symbol, whatever it is that you want that makes that task unique in Taskfeed. It only has to be unique for the board, but I like to say make sure it's unique so you don't get duplicates. So as you can see here for this task, I put Handover. And for each line of my tasks, it's going to have a little word or just, the same task name. So just don't make it very long. And the predecessor reference is what links the first task to the next task. So they don't necessarily have to be in sequence, but if you want a task to have dependencies, so as you can see over here, I'm going to schedule my kickoff call. So obviously my kickoff call is not going to happen until the scheduled kickoff call task is complete. So what that translates to is over here, you see this hand. It means that the task is not ready. So first, I need my internal handover. So when I complete this task, this one is now ready. This one will have a hand after I have done, I've scheduled my kickoff call. This one will be ready, so I must complete. So this is the start of my dependencies. Now let's talk about the duration. The duration is in days. 1 day, it's for a full day event. So we don't put hours. We can put estimated hours for that. And this is, how many hours you think it takes for you to complete a certain task. This is great if your users are logging time against a task, if there are billable hours involved. So this is what you would be doing this for. Now let's talk about the lead lag days. A lag time is the delay between the first and the second activity. So for instance, let's say that kickoff call has now happened and we want to send the implementation agreement the next day after the kickoff call happens. If there's a delay or a wait period before the next activity starts, this is called the lag, and that delay is known as the lag time. Now, let's talk about the lead time. When the first activity is still running and the next activity starts, this is called the lead. The balance of time for the previous activity is known as lead time. So lead time is the overlap between the first and the next activity. So in the template, we use a number of days to represent either the lag or the lead in the same field, which is the lead lag days. So back on our template over here, for instance, you see, let me freeze this column over here so you can see what I'm talking about. Now, let's say that my implementation is going on over here, and that is going to happen over the course of 5 days. But I want to do my customer progress check-in. I want to start checking on my customer before these 5 implementation days happen, okay? So I'm going to set here a lead time of 2 days. This means that over the course of this duration, this task, this next task over here is going to happen after 3 days that this starts, okay? So this is in relationship to the previous task, the lead lag. Why is that? Well, because this is the predecessor task. It's related to this one. And now I'm telling him when to start. So the lead and the lag, they are in relationship to the finish of the previous task. All right. So as I said, the estimated hours are the number of hours that you think a task might take to complete. So for instance, the implementation obviously is not going to take a single hour. So let's say that's going to take 10 hours. And that's my estimate. And then people can log time, and that time can be over or it can be under, okay? And anyone responsible for doing that can log time against it. So let's talk about the roles before I talk about the categories. So the roles are very important because they are not roles in the Salesforce role hierarchy. They are roles in Taskfeed. They are roles in your particular project. Out of the box, you're going to see roles like account manager, pre-sales consultant, and project manager. You can add more roles, and I can show you how as you need them. So if you're onboarding, you might want to create an onboarding manager. So if you have access to setup in your org, you go to setup and you go over here and you type pick list. You're going to go to pick list value sets and you're going to find team role as a global value set. So let's say I want to add an onboarding manager now. If you need to add more than one at a time, you can do that. Just add another line. So let's say implementation manager, training specialist, you name it. Okay? And then you save. Great. So now I have a whole bunch of new roles. So let's go back, and I want my implementation to be done by my project manager to oversee it, but I also want an implementation manager. You can add more than one role, just separate it by a semicolon. Rule number 1 that you should know about source files and Taskfeed. When you create a Taskfeed template, never put a comma anywhere because you're saving this source file as a CSV, and CSVs understand commas as command separation. So it's not going to work. It's going to create a huge confusion, so just don't do it. Okay? So back to my roles. You can add any roles here that make sense to you. And now for my categories. Taskfeed categories, I talked a little bit about it in the previous webinar, but if you didn't watch it, it's basically labels that you can use on your tasks to identify and give a little bit more information about your tasks. And they can be color-coded, which is a lot of fun. So all you have to do is define them ahead of time over here in Taskfeed categories. Create them as you need them, okay? So for instance, I have these client action item, event. Let's see what else I have over here. I have one for implementation. So I'm going to add a category called implementation. And I'm going to give it a color. You can either type green or you can use a CSS compatible color. So for instance, if you go to a place like Color Hex or HTML colors, you can find one of these fun colors over here and give it a, so let me get this color, this shade of green. So you just copy that code and then you paste it. And there you go. And you can add a little description. So used for implementation items. Great. Any other ones that I have here? Event. Oh, I have one for handover. So I don't think I have that one yet. So let me create a new one. And I'm going to give it a new color. This purple here looks like fun. Cool. All right, so back to my template. Now that I have those categories defined, next time when I create a board and it has those categories, you will see them as labels like this. So client action item, event, and when you go on the plan view, it has different colors as well. And when you go on the table view, they appear as these labels. So, all right, great. So now let's save this as a CSV. I think I covered these. Oh, let's put, I'm going to use another column. So you can add columns. So I'm going to insert over here, and I'm going to put internal only. And that is, the values are true or false. So if I'm using external sharing, and when I share the plan with a customer, if there are certain things that I don't want them to see, then I'm going to hide it. So for instance, internal handover, that's not really relevant to them. So I'm going to put this as true. And I'm pretty happy for them to see everything else. So I'm going to mark this as false. Now let me unfreeze this. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to save, download a CSV. So if you're using Google Sheets, download as a CSV. Very, very important. If you're using, here you go, let me show you. If you're using Excel, you're going to want to save it as, so let me go, File, Save As. Some versions of Excel are a little bit different and sensitive. You're going to want to save CSV UTF-8. So that's your magic format, okay? And let's import this template now. So I'm going to go and find Taskfeed Templates, and I'm going to create a new one. So my, let's call that my quick implementation. And remember I told you we have two formats. One is list and one is task. Well, this one was a task template. And now for the board type. So Taskfeed comes with two board types out of the box. It comes with team and it comes with project. You can create more board types as you need. So this one was one that I created ahead of time, a custom one. And I'm going to use that template for my onboarding. When you relate a task template to a board type, it means that every time when you go to Taskfeed and you create a board and you choose that type, the template will be imported automatically. If you select none, then it won't import automatically, but you can still import it manually as long as it's active. Okay? So I'm going to type a description. So, and I'm going to select the board type onboarding. Now, in this window, I'm going to click Choose File, and that's where I'm going to create my template. So there you go. Let's make sure it's got all my changes that I created. Great. So you're going to see a preview, and if everything checks and you don't have commas, so it's always worth giving a quick, Command F and looking for commas in your spreadsheet. So great. Doesn't have any commas. You're not going to get an error. You're all good. Activate it. Because even if you activate it in that previous window, it's not going to activate until you upload and validate the template. Okay? So now let's create an onboarding board and see what happens. I'm going to create a new board and call it my onboarding. I'm going to relate it to an account. And I'm going to select a board team member to help me. Sally will be my onboarding manager. So as you can see, it created a series of tasks already because I had the start date on the first task to today. It's going to be today's date when I create it, okay? You can also, if you didn't want it, if you want the internal handover from sales to onboarding to happen the day before you start your project, all you have to do is do today -1, okay? But you're going to see that the first task is already going to be overdue. Or if you want to be today +1, or if you want to get a little bit more sophisticated, you can relate it to an existing field that you have in Taskfeed board. So say, for instance, that you closed an opportunity in Salesforce. Let me show you an example. So let's go to opportunities. You're going to see certain fields over here that have a date, like close date. So let's say I have a close date on my opportunity and I want my project, the start date to be the same date as my close date in opportunity. How would I do that? Well, you wanted tips and tricks, so here I am to show you. You're going to have to create a formula field in Taskfeed boards because the start date on your task template refers to the start date of your project. So it's always the first task and all of the other tasks will follow. You literally do not have to put a date on every single task. So let's go to Setup. And let's go to Taskfeed Boards. Fields and Relationships. And New. And Formula. And I'm going to call it Opportunity Close Date. And it's a formula date field. Let's go to Advanced Formula, Insert Field, Taskfeed Board. Out of the box, it's already related to an opportunity. So let's go to Opportunity Close Date, Insert. Let's check the syntax. All good. Click Next. I'm going to give it to any of my profiles, okay, and save. Great. So now I have that field. I'm going to check its API name over here. So I called it Opportunity Close Date. Go and copy that API name. Great. And now I'm going to add it to my Taskfeed template, okay? Because I want it to be when I have an opportunity. If you don't have an opportunity, that is not going to make sense at all. So make sure when you're creating your boards, if you want to do that, that you have an opportunity that is going to have that date pre-populated. You could do the same thing for an account or for a custom field in another object. So if you're relating it to a custom object or an account or somewhere else, just create a formula field on your Taskfeed board, or even if you want to create a date field and put that manually on your board, you can, all you have to do is grab that API name and put that as the start date, okay? So I'm going to save it, download, and I'm also going to show you at the same time how to modify an existing Taskfeed template. So let's close that out. And that was my pretty board, which I will go back to. When you modify a Taskfeed template, it's not going to affect existing boards. It's only going to affect boards that you create from now on in the future, because after all, it's a template. So if you wanted to use this as your opportunity close date, then you would have to modify that in a different way, like manually. And this is my quick implementation. If you want to modify an existing template, you just click Choose File. You select a new template, upload, and validate. Make sure it's active. So if you don't see that this box is active, you go ahead and activate this. So now let's create a new board, and I'm going to make sure it has an opportunity. So and as you can see, my close date was January 26th, and that's my first day for my internal handover. There you go. Like magic. So we have a few questions. Let's go to the first one. So when using the template to create and edit your lists, can you include a column for color to define what color that list should be? Yes, absolutely you can. This is a lot of fun. I'm going to be talking about list templates at a separate session, but I can show you how that would be done. So let me open a list template so you can see. So this is what a list template looks like. So as you can see, it also has the name column, but the name relates to list names, okay? So it's similar in a lot of ways, but most of these values are going to be true and false. And we also have a list template cheat sheet, which will tell you exactly which fields you can use. So anything that I haven't covered here, for either the task template or the list template, you can see which fields you can add and what the values should be in the format. So let's add here a field for background color. And the same way that I grabbed some colors over here with my color hex, you can do that as well for your color. So all you have to do is add a hash. So let's see. I'm gonna grab this color. And let's grab this purple. Okay, cool. So now I have that, and I'm going to change these names just so you can see the difference. So and obviously you can change the behavior as well. So I'm going to download as a CSV, and I'm going to upload it. So let's go to Taskfeed Templates. So I'm going to make this for my onboarding lists, okay? List templates have a one-to-one relationship to a board type. If you don't relate them to any board types, they are not going to show up. So you cannot select a list template after you have created a board. You have to do that ahead of time. So the template format is list, and I'm going to select it for this type. Okay, so it will give you a preview. It has a couple of colors. Over here, I'm going to activate it and save. So now I'm going to create yet another onboarding board, and let's see what happens now that I have a list template and a task template. Now, remember that I had my not started list, and one of the first things I said was, well, if you change your lists and you're going to relate it, make sure that they match. So let's go ahead and do that, because now I don't have my not started list anymore. It's called to do. So let me make sure the spelling is right. Actually, it's like this. I'm going to download again. So ideally, you wouldn't be having to do this all the time. You just define your process, make up your mind about what these lists should be named. So let's go ahead, modify. As you can see, it has now changed to do. Great. And most of the time when you're updating, it will auto activate for you if it's already active. So that's already saved. So and there you go. As you can see, those colors were preset ahead of time. So just like magic. So let's go for the next questions. Will the customer progress check-in show as ready even though the predecessor is not yet complete? Won't it still be blocked?
Yes, but in reality, there is nothing stopping people working on it. Dependencies help with scheduling and rescheduling tasks.
If you have different people working on different tasks, they won't get a notification that a task is ready until it actually is ready. So it doesn't mean, like, sometimes you can start on something before it is ready. You can modify these things on the dependencies. So let's say, for instance, this is dependent on this, the implementation agreement on the kickoff call, which would make sense that you wouldn't start this until your kickoff call or your workshop. But say that during the kickoff call, you were able to schedule your team workshop as well at the same time. You can do this. You can remove a dependency and work and it's like, look, I was able to agree on this with my customer. I'm going to mark this as complete. Great. And I'm going to go ahead and schedule my team workshop as well. So done. So in my list, I had marked my tasks to not show in my plan view if they're complete, but I can still see them here. So this is another thing that you can customize on your lists. So for instance, you can hide them from the plan view, but if you want to see them from the plan view, all you have to do is edit this and you'll be able to see them again. So there you go. So that's another thing that you can do from a list template is adjust the behavior of how you want them to appear on these different views. So I think we have another question.
So you can't use a comma anywhere on the template?
No, you cannot. So for punctuation, use a semicolon. Obviously, if you're creating, for instance, a task manually, and you add something to the detail and you put a comma, that's fine. The only problem that you're going to have is when you're creating a template and you want to use that in Taskfeed, you want to upload.
A CSV or comma-separated values file will treat the comma as a field separator, which is why a comma out of place may result in an error. Can you please show how to add the checklist items on an existing template? And do you have to modify the CSV in order for the next board you create to do the checklist items? You can add checklist items to an existing template by editing its source file. So I'm going to show you here in my example with my source file from my onboarding template how to add checklist items to the implementation task. So I'm going to add a few checklist items and separate each line with a hash symbol. So now that I have created those 4 checklist items for my implementation task, I will download it as a CSV again or save as a CSV if I'm using Excel. And then I'm going back to Salesforce in Taskfeed Templates, find my existing task template record that I had previously created, and I will choose a new file for it. So I found my new file, upload and validate that template file. Make sure it's active. And now I can go and create a new board that will have those new checklist items. This change will not apply to any existing boards, so you will have to create checklist items to boards that had the previous task template manually onto the board. As you will see, the implementation task has 4 checklist items now. Notice that this is a new board I have just created. If I open a previous board that had the old task template, those checklist items won't be there. But I can create checklist items onto this board manually.
Okay, so when you create a checklist item manually, you can also assign it to someone, which is something you cannot do from the template.
However, when you define roles for each task on the template, once you assign users to those roles, you can manually assign yourself or someone else to a checklist item.
So a lot of the time, you're going to create checklist items manually as your project goes because you're going to remember specific things about a task. The same way that you can post things on Chatter, and the same way that you can attach files. This is not something that you're going to do from a template. The template is merely defining your process.
Yes, you can include a detail column on your task template to add some more information about each task. Just make sure you don't add any commas and that, of course, you save it as a CSV file again and that you upload it to your task template record if you make any changes to its source file.
Not all tasks need to be dependent on one another, okay? So let's say that customer progress check-in is not dependent on any other task. I'm going to remove the predecessor reference, okay? So this one is you still need to have a reference, but it no longer needs a predecessor reference. So I'm going to remove this dependency, okay? I just have the duration, but now I need to add a start date for it because it no longer has a dependency to anybody else over here on the board. So it's not going to be scheduled unless you give it a date. So I'm going to give it a reference to this first date plus 15. Okay, and this is just a random date that I just created, and I'll show you how it's going to look. And I'm not going to relate it to any board type because I want to import it manually. So now when I create a board, I'm going to use it in a board that I know doesn't have any templates related to it. Which is team. And this is how you can import a template manually. You're going to see all your active templates over there, even the ones that are related to other boards. So as you can see, my task that didn't have that dependency, which was customer progress check-in, okay, is now set for March 7th, which is 15 days after the first task. And because I didn't relate it to any other opportunities, that's why the date is set for today. So let's go over here on my plan view. As you can see, it doesn't have a dependency. It only has downstream dependencies because the downstream were dependent on this task, but it's not dependent to my implementation as before, and I set a date. So a good way of doing that would be a go live date, for instance. This is some people like to set, a target for a date in the future, like a go live date. I like to put that task without having any dependencies.
This way, if your plans change, when the project starts, your milestones don't have to be directly impacted, and you can adjust the duration of other tasks to fit your goals. We're all out of time and we don't have any more questions, so we can quickly review some task templates, do's and don'ts. Stay tuned for more webinars, and you can find more information on help.taskfeedapp.com on our YouTube channel. You can ask questions on the chat widget on the Taskfeed tab, or you can email us at support@taskfeedapp.com. Thank you for watching our webinar, and thank you for choosing Taskfeed. Have a great day.